Hey guys, it's me, and I am back with Jacqueline Woodson's Harbor Me. Now, I have to tell you guys, honestly, it feels a little hard to read this when nobody's listening, right? Feels kind of like, why am I doing it? So Miles did mention that maybe I could read aloud in class instead of doing these recordings, and so if that's the case, I'm gonna have to find a different way to do it. Okay, so but for now, Harbor Harbor Me by Jacqueline Woodson. All right, y'all, where are we at? What is happening? We're on chapter 16. I only read one chapter yesterday. Number one, I was in a rush to get to school to come see you, which was so much fun. And number two, I got all emotional. I had all the feels yesterday. I promise I won't cry today. The idea of freedom came up, right? And it just hit me like a ton of bricks about how distinctly different life is for everyone. And for everyone in our classroom, everything is different. And for everybody in this book, life is different. They were talking about how everything changed in a moment. I even made a note of that. I know what it's like, and I wrote a connection that I made, and it was that I know what it's like to have things change overnight. And one of the characters was talking about how everything changed for him overnight. And I made the connection that everything changed for us overnight too with COVID, right? Like all of a sudden we just didn't something that was happening far away, and then all of a sudden it's happening in our country, and everything changed. Like we stopped going to school, and then like just everything, right? Everything changed. And then, but that's not what they're talking about, right? Because COVID hasn't happened yet when this book takes place. But what they're talking about is everything that's happening in America as far as social and racial justice. And he brought up Tamir Rice, which was the little 12-year-old boy that got murdered while playing with a toy gun in a park. And so many levels of messed up, I just can't even wrap my head around it. And it really affected me because on so many levels. Number one, they're all upset about it. Number two, I'm making connections with you guys and what it's like to be in your lives. And I started thinking about, as a mom, what it would be like if I had to sit my girls down and tell them. And the truth is, we do have to sit our girls down and tell them about things that they can and cannot do because other people can't control themselves. And that's messed up, right? But those things can be changed, but the color of your skin cannot be changed. And so, yeah, I got emotional. I got my mom vibes on, my teacher vibes on, my friend, my empathy was running so high that it ran overboard. And just kind of that realization, right? That stuff happens and it's real. And I just love in this book how it's bringing these things up. And it's talking about it from the perspective of the dad, right? The little boy is telling the kid, he's a little boy, but he's not that little. He's telling his story. And he's telling a story about when his dad sat him down and had to have that talk with him about, you can't go play with guns anymore. And okay, so today I was just talking about how interesting parts in books, right? And how you write it down because then you can make connections. Well, guess what? Just now, I was thinking, it was really interesting to me about how there were the storytelling behind the dad being able to have a sit down with his kid and be like, hey, you can't go out there and play with guns anymore. It's not safe to do that, and it's not fair, and it blows, but it's just the way it is, right? And when they're having this conversation in the classroom, because that was interesting, I just remembered this part of the conversation, and that was Ashton. So Ashton pipes in, and they're like, but this doesn't apply to you, bro. It's not your story. You can still do that. You can go and do that, but we can't. And so that's a huge point that I could have missed if I didn't take the time to think about the interesting part. I wouldn't remember that in my recap, right? That they made that connection that things are different if you are Black or if you are white. And we know it's not fair. So that's not even an issue, right? Like we know that that's not even it's malarkey. It's not something that like is anywhere near fair. So it's like that's out of the question. But it's just a fact, right? And so I just thought that was interesting. So that they brought us up, and then that gives us a little bit more information about who Ashton is, who we have not met very much of. And so just that he's got that curly hair. And I remember that because I have curly hair. And so I'm like, oh, does anybody ever look at me and see when I'm reading about my curly hair, how my curls are falling? Like Haley does, or how, whatever. All right. Let's get started. My eyes are burning, Hilardo. What is going on today? All right. So, chapter 16. It was 3:15, and we could hear the kids moving through the hall and leaving school. But none of us moved. Then the halls got quiet. It felt like we were the only ones left in the building. Ashton was looking down at his hands. Amari gave me back the recorder and started putting his drawing pad and pens back into his knapsack. I slid the recorder into mine. The door squealed open and Miss Laverne came in. She had this small smile, that grown-up smile that says, "See, I knew this was the right thing." But then she saw that none of us were smiling. "All okay?" she asked. We didn't say anything at first. Then Amari said, "We're good. We're just finishing up." He sounded like a grown-up. "Okay." Miss Laverne looked a little confused. "Be out of here by 3:30 at the latest, and have a good weekend." We all said goodbye to her and waited until the door clicked shut. "I think your dad's being unfair," Ashton said. "It's just playing, and plus, the Nerf guns are orange, so it's not like they look real or anything." "The kid that got killed had a toy gun," Amari said. "My pops said it's like we're suspects from the day we're born." Amari and Ashton looked at each other, both of them mad. "Yeah," Holly said. "And what about all the other kids we don't even see on the news? Like my cousin who got stopped on his bike and handcuffed, and he's only 13. He was just riding his bike. But the cops said he fit the description of another kid on a bike. How many black kids ride bikes? Lots." "Something like that happened to my cousin Jonathan," Tiago said. "He lives in the Bronx, and this cop just pushed him when he was hanging out with his boys. They were hanging out by those mansions up by Van Cortlandt Park, and the cop said they didn't live there, but one of his friends did. Plus, that cop said they were being loud. But they're teenagers, so duh." "Yeah," Holly said. "Show me some quiet teenagers." "What about that guy with asthma that they choked?" Amari said. "And that other guy who got beat up by a bunch of cops and nobody would have known about it if somebody hadn't recorded it on their phone." "It could happen to anyone," Ashton said, "not just like black guys and Puerto Rican guys." Amari stood there, looking at Ashton for a minute. Then he just shook his head and put his backpack on his shoulder. "Show me one time when it was somebody who looked like you, Ashton." "I still think," Ashton started to say. Amari didn't even wait for him to finish, though. Just left without even waving goodbye. Chapter 17. The Familiar. You walk the land you've always known. The river, the ocean, the deep forest belong to you. This is Lenapehoking. This is your home. You know the print of every animal moving through the dirt: deer, raccoon, rabbit, bear. You know the scent of pine and the many ways root bark can heal. Then one day, there's a ship on the water, and then another and another. You learn quickly that the men on board aren't kind. Behind you, children play a game involving small stones. Behind you, your mother and your grandmother scrape an animal hide clean, then hang it to dry in the sun. A baby sleeps shaded inside his cradle board, hanging from a tree. You watch, listen to the stories that women tell each other, the way their gossip lifts up into the wind and moves through this land that's your land. Then men come closer and raise their guns. For a long time, these people's stories will bury yours. Would you harbor me? Who would you have harbored? Miss Laverne asked. I thought of this as Amari left the classroom with his knapsack on his shoulder and Ashton looked down at his hands. Chapter 18. That afternoon, Holly's mom, Kira, picked us up from school. She was talking on her phone as we climbed into the car, her braids hanging down over the back of her seat. Did you get? Holly started asking, and her mom held up my sleepover bag, then put her fingers to her lips. So many times I'd stared at Kira, wondering if my mom had looked like her. The one picture I had of her showed my mom and dad walking away from someone's car. My mother in a long white coat and hat, and my father in a t-shirt and jeans. Her hand was trailing back behind her, and I could see her fingers long and dark brown, the nails painted bright red. How many times had me and Holly painted our nails? 100, 1,000, and each time I held my hand out, I wanted it to transform into the bright red and brown of my mother's hand every single time. But I never could. In the fall, my skin started fading back to a lighter brown, blue veins showing on the inside of my arms. But in the summer, it darkened so much that strangers asked, "What are you?" Question I hated. "Tell them you're a human," Holly always said, "and then ask them, what are they?" What could happen today? Kira asked when she was finally hung up her cell and got ready to drive. Nothing, Holly said before I could even open my mouth. Can we get pizza? Out the window, I saw Ashton walking by himself, his hands shoved way down in his pockets. An older boy approached him and slapped the back of Ashton's neck. Then another boy did the same thing, and another. All of them were laughing. I watched Ashton sink further down into himself, his eyebrows furrowing as he tried to swat the hands away. I wanted to jump out of the car and run over, but we were already pulling away from the curb. When he got to the corner, Ashton started running. Maybe he ran all the way home. Did you see that? I asked Holly. See what? Nothing. And can we get the pizza from the place on Nostrand? Holly said to her mom. I don't like that other place. You and Dad do, but I don't. After a minute, she said, Haley doesn't either. I'm good either way, I said, still looking out the window. It's called necking. In the olden days, necking meant kissing, but not anymore. Now it meant running up to someone and slapping their neck hard. How did the same word that described two people in love become a word that described something so mean? Now I remembered some mornings when Ashton came into class and his neck so red it looked like sunburn. And I get to choose the movie, Holly was saying. Something good this time. No R ratings, her mother said. No trying to sneak in an R rating after I'm asleep. The familiar. You plan what movie you're going to watch. You pull your collar up to hide the pain showing on your neck. You sit staring out a window, remembering your poppy. You pack your Nerf guns away, maybe forever, and you walk into the unfamiliar. We drove by brownstones and apartment buildings. Signs in the corner bodega window said, "We accept EBT," and "ATM inside." The familiar. There weren't a lot of white kids at our school. There were some little ones in kindergarten and first and second grade, but not in fifth and sixth. Ashton was the only white kid in our room, unless you counted half of me. "I'm cooking tonight," Kira said, "and we need to get to work on Haley's hair." I looked up in time to see Holly roll her eyes. "Her hair looks fine to me, Ma." But we both knew she was lying just so we could get to the movie part of the night faster. The one thing my uncle never mastered was my hair. Even though the red came from my father, the curls and kink came from my mom. My uncle had watched videos about kinky hair and brought products that were supposed to make it easy to comb through. He'd learned that a fine-toothed comb was never going to make its way through my hair, and that a wide-toothed comb one really only worked when my hair was wet. When I was 5, he held a black girlfriend. When I was 5, he had a black girlfriend for about 3 months, and I swear they broke up because she couldn't help him with my hair. Looking back at that, I remember the woman had a nearly shaved head, which should have been a sign to him that hair wasn't her specialty. Then one day, after me and Holly had become friends, Kira walked over to my uncle in the schoolyard. "I can help you with your daughter's hair," she said. Holly was standing beside her hair neatly braided into cornrows. "That's her uncle, Ma," Holly said, "not her dad." And that was the beginning of me spending most Friday nights at Holly's house. Sometimes my uncle went out on dates those nights. When I was little, I was so afraid he'd fall in love with somebody and leave me. Or worse, move them in and then they'd try to become my mother. But that never happened. And now I don't feel that way. Some days, seeing the loneliness in my uncle's face, hearing him play his sad love songs on the guitar, watching the way he looked at other couples on the street, I wanted him to fall in love. I wanted him to have a happy ending. "You okay?" Kira asked me through the review mirror. She looked worried. "I'm good," I smiled at her. "Why wouldn't you be?" Holly said, suddenly reaching over and hugging me hard. "It's Friday." "Yes," we said together, like we'd done so many Fridays before. "I got a new nail polish for us to try," Holly said. "It's called Royal Ruby." "Cool," I said. Maybe that would be the one. All right, my friends, I am going to stop here. We are at chapter 19, just cruising along. Okay, lots of stuff that we're learning, right? So Holly, his mom was black, and then her dad is white. I think he was like, I wanted to say he was Puerto Rican. I don't know why I had that in my head. Ashton, we have learned officially is white. I'm assuming I'm just going to make the assumption that Holly's black just because her mom specializes in combing black hair. Yeah. So there's that. All right, friends. I gotta go. It's been great reading for you. I hope you read it. I hope you listen, please. All right. Bye, Dad. Dad listens. That's cool. All right, guys.